Howdy! Welcome back. I'm sorry that this took so long to come out. The video ended up being a little bit longer than I expected it to be, so let's just get right into things, yeah? Okay, so Lust is going to actually end up being one of the more spicy layers to talk about. No, not because of that! Get your head out of the gutter! It's actually because my thoughts on its design are extremely contradictory. Prepare your butts for an oxymoron, because Lust is, I think, arguably one of the best layers in the game, but also, I think Lust is probably the worst layer in the game. Listen, it will make sense, I promise! Please don't leave me! Okay, so, on one hand, I think the Lust layer is arguably the most cohesive layer in the entire game when you consider the entire package it provides. Each of its 4 non-secret levels come together in such a well-thought-out manner that creates a near-unrivaled sense of flow between them. The Act Climax layers don't count, by the way. They're cheating because they only have 2 levels. The way each level in Lust ties into the ones coming before and after, while all still remaining very unique in their concepts, is just extremely satisfying to me. See, every layer likes to try to have a sort of natural progression to it in some way, like how in Limbo each level progressed with the time of day. Other layers later on might center around your proximity to a specific, easy-to-recognize landmark or set piece, and some other ones will have the progression more so be based on the underlying thematic concepts at play. And the Lust layer manages to take things a step further beyond, and fuses the progression of its levels and the different locations we get to see in each level to tell a bit of a story, while also having an extremely natural and satisfying sense of physical progression. And it does all of this without having any dialogue or cutscenes. The only extra reading to add context to things is a singular book in 2-2, and the terminal entry for the boss fight at the end of the layer. There is just so much that the Lust layer does oh so right. Looking at the bigger picture of the entire experience, it's just a masterpiece. It's so well done. But, it does have its cracks, and, like, there are a lot of cracks. Okay, so remember what I said about 1-2 in the last video? I'm assuming you've watched my video on the Limbo layer. If you haven't, you probably should go do that. But anyway, to quickly recap, the issue with 1-2 is that the level has a really cool concept, however, it doesn't actually give itself the proper chance to explore that concept in as much depth as it could because of overall messy level design. And, that's almost sort of the issue with every single level in the Lust layer except for 2-3 and 2-S. I think the levels of the Lust layer, when you look at them through the lens of considering them as their own individual levels instead of the entire package of the Lust layer, are kind of some of the worst in the game. There are a lot of weird and unfortunate design choices that really hold some of these back from reaching their true potential. See what I mean when I said this was gonna be oxymoronic? Like, Lust somehow manages to simultaneously be the best layer in the game and the worst layer in the game at the exact same time, and hopefully I can properly explain that sentiment throughout the course of this video as we take a look at each level individually. Anyway, let's just get right into it now. 2-1. Yes, the kills needed to get a P rank for 2-1 is the funny sex number. Har har har. Get your laughs out now, this is the last sex joke of the video, okay? Got it? Good, behave now. Alright, here we go. Just to, once again quickly set the tone from the ending of the Limbo layer, previously on our adventure, we just got done wiping the floor with our successor, V2, causing her to wimp out and run away like a little baby, allowing us to steal her arm that she leaves behind and add it to our repertoire of fun murder tools. And so, you are probably feeling pretty confident about yourself and your skills for managing to emerge victorious against such a distinctly formidable foe. You have proven the game that you are in fact very cool, and now you're obviously ready to face whatever it might throw at you from this point onwards, right? Well, that's certainly interesting. This kinda just looks like the prelude, but, you know, bisexual, I guess. Once again, I must ask the question, are we even actually in hell here? Because based on what we know so far, this looks distinctly human-made. Well, I guess based on these elevators, then the factory at the mouth of hell that was probably extracting resources, it's not entirely unreasonable to imagine that the humans managed to build more facility areas deeper inside of hell, but like, if that's the case, why wasn't the Limbo layer completely industrialized? See, okay, This opening is really well done because we haven't actually gotten the proper reveal yet. The game is intentionally keeping its cards close to its chest for now. It's creating a mystery, since unlike the Limbo layer, you cannot yet find the most crucial pieces of this particular puzzle. And this is paired extremely well with the slightly unnerving ambient drone playing, creating this nice feeling of uncertainty. This new situation is almost strangely explainable. Beyond the color of the lighting, this looks familiar to us. But the fact that this feels familiar at all is kinda weird. Now, the level gives you some time to dwell on this bizarrely grounded tower you seem to find yourself scaling, and it uses this moment of relative downtime as a tutorial for the Knuckle Blaster, but we'll get to that later. Once you scale the tower, you get to the introduction of jump pads, and more importantly, the actual reveal of what the Lust layer is like. The music cuts in at the perfect moment to accompany the reveal of a city. Why? Why is there a city here? This mid-level bait-and-switch twist just also works far better than the one from 1-2, since, like, you still actually have most of the level ahead of you. The level actually has time to let you dwell on this new idea it has presented you with, instead of basically immediately throwing it away as soon as things get interesting. While this moment retroactively gives the player context to the environment of the opening moments of the level, explaining the industrial aesthetic to be that of the inside of a particularly tall skyscraper, this reveal also kinda just raises more questions. The scope of the situation is abruptly expanded and thus further complicated. You can see the general idea now, but you still don't have any of the context for what exactly this is and why it's here. This interesting environment establishes a lot of different ideas without saying a single word to the player or making them read anything at all. It's the perfect hook for the narrative of the Lust layer. Why is there a full-on city here? Is this city still active? Do people live here? There are lights on in the skyscrapers below us, and we appear to be in the middle of a construction site. Unlike the Limbo layer, where the initial confusion quickly gives way to a morbid understanding, with all of the small details immediately starting to piece together in your mind as you begin to comprehend the meticulous malice and cruelty behind the environment around you, this literally does not make any sort of sense at all. If this is hell, there is no discernible punishment here. Things seem honestly pretty fine outside of, well, the elephant in the room that I neglected to immediately address. This colossal monstrosity looming in the distance. It's a bit too far away to make out many details, but you can see one thing for certain. Its eyes that cast blinding cones of light down on the city below it as it stomps around, wreaking havoc, presumably destroying anything in its path. Eyes. It has eyes. The atmosphere here is cold. It's wonderfully desolate. There is something wrong here, but you can't quite put your finger on what. The details of the Lust layer, for now, really don't come together at all. The only thing that seems kind of like it's meant to punish sinners is big stompy wompy over here, but like, it doesn't feel like it fits its surroundings at all. In fact, a big ol' monster is in direct conflict with the concept of a city, and the question that might now raise in your mind is whether or not it, or the city, is the invader in this scenario. Fun fact, the answer is both actually. Neither of them are supposed to be here. You never get to see what Lust originally looked like in any way at all, which is, it's really cool. Oh my god, this is such an effective way to kick off the Lust layer. It immediately establishes the setting while still leaving you with a lot of things to ponder, which sparks so much intrigue about the area you are now immersed in, and now makes it more likely that you will be engaged in the story that Lust will try to tell you. But of course, it doesn't give you everything all at once. It slowly reveals more and more as you explore further and further into the city. The experience of playing through the Lust layer is that of unraveling a mystery. I really appreciate that the Lust layer isn't just like a bunch of sex stuff, because that's kind of what basically every other depiction of hell does, aside from, you know, Inferno itself. And while that is thematically fitting for representing lust, Ultrakill's very different approach is genuinely refreshing. Also, can I mention how much I love that the concept of being high up in the sky on the scaffolding for a construction site of a skyscraper is meant to be a twist on the general idea of the lust layer from the Divine Comedy, which Ultrakill is, of course, based on. In the Divine Comedy, the lust layer is based around harsh winds that kind of just toss you around forever, and interpreting that as being the harsher winds from being high up outside in a city is so creative. It's one of the many ways that the Ultrakill developers faithfully interpret aspects of Dante's Inferno while also allowing Ultrakill to still be its own distinctly unique depiction of hell. Before I move on to talking about the fumbles of 2-1, I want to say that Lust without a doubt got by far one of the biggest thematic improvements from the Ultra Revamp update. Even though the Prelude technically got the most changes, Lust got, I would argue, some of the most impactful ones. First of all, the city is actually a city, and not just like a super blurry PNG of apparently Manhattan. Like, it's a fully modeled city. It's super cool, and it really helps a lot because, well, it was previously kinda hard to tell that it was a city unless you really squinted at the super blurry PNG, so the work done in the Ultra Revamp update helps tremendously to allow the initial moment of beholding the city for the first time to have its full impact, since, you know, there is actually a city to be beheld now. By the way, the city is extremely detailed too. There's like unique districts and roads and alleyways, there's all sorts of insanely unnecessary but really cool stuff. They went all out on it, and by they, I mean she, and by she, I mean the game's lead modeler and lead 3D artist, Victoria Holland, who seems very cool and also has like a paper she made where I linked in the description where she goes into detail about all of the cool behind the scenes stuff going on here. I highly recommend you go read it if you haven't yet. As for changes that are specific to 2-1, the revamp update added 4 cranes into the level, and apart from the one you can ride on while it spins, they don't technically add anything to the level gameplay-wise, but their presence alone elevates the context of the level from being some weird sky platforms to like a construction site, which retroactively makes the weird, disconnected platforms suspended in midair make more sense. It was a very clever move. I do also like the much higher emphasis on movement and platforming here, even if it is a little bit awkwardly executed, as I will soon cover. The distinct sections of the level here are great for adding a little extra strain on the player's platforming skills. The tower areas require the use of either wall jumps, slam jumps, or explosion jumps if the player is feeling particularly daring. The platforming required here isn't at all strict, and it doesn't force precision. However, it does require you to at least do something a little bit beyond just using your basic jump to get places, just in case a few players made it this far without messing around more with their mobility options. Following the climb up the tower, the outside area is the most open space the player has had the freedom to move around in so far. Yet, at the same time, the floor space you have to fight the enemy spawns in is quite narrow, meaning you have to either refine your movement so you are precise enough to not fall off the sides of the level too frequently, or become more comfortable with fighting while airborne, making use of the freedom of open airspace to absolutely dance on the enemies, which is helped tremendously by the bounce pads that are scattered around beneath the level, which both act as a safety net as well as a free way to gain a bunch of height on the mostly level platforms of the outside portion of the level. And of course, more skilled players can do away with needing these bounce pads entirely. A lot of the secrets and the level challenge are all tied into this more platforming-centered gameplay identity. The challenge is to get through the level without using any doors, which of course means you have to first find the secret path out of the first building through a cracked drainage pipe before presenting you with a conundrum that requires a much more in-depth understanding of how Ultrakill's movement works in order to solve. Actually, okay, the crane that you spin around on and ride technically removes some of what made the secret it was connected to interesting. You used to have to come up with a creative way to build enough momentum to cross the gap between the secret orb and the main path of the level, since the distance was too far to be traveled with dashes or dash jumps, meaning you had to mess around with explosion jumps, which I think also worked really well with the overall slightly heavier emphasis on platforming that 2-1 has, but like, also, whee! Alright, that's unfortunately enough being nice. I've sadly gotta talk about the bad stuff now. I know, it sucks, I have to be negative, but since Ultrakill is my favorite video game, I want to be extra sure to do my best to provide a balanced perspective when analyzing its design. You see, while 2-1 manages to absolutely nail its tone and art direction and it sets up the rest of the layer perfectly, the actual gameplay itself is, well, it's mostly functional. The concept for the gameplay, as I said, is really neat, but I really don't think it managed to pull it off quite as well as it should have. Firstly, we need to talk about the Knuckle Blaster tutorial, which I already kind of covered in my weapons video, but like, I'm gonna expand upon that a bit more here because, oh my god, it is terrible. So, in order for one of these weapon tutorial sections to succeed at their job of being an effective introduction to the new weapon the game gives you, they need to accomplish two things. One, it needs to teach you how to use the weapon. And then two, the level needs to effectively convey to the player why the new weapon is cool and interesting and unique and fun to use. In a game where there really isn't any sort of opportunity cost because you have all of your weapons, you need to really make sure the different weapons stick out in the player's mind, otherwise they're just gonna get forgotten about. And the Knuckle Blaster tutorial does, neither. The idea is that you are meant to use it to knock this schism that spawns in off of the platform, thereby teaching the player about the comically high knockback that the Knuckle Blaster has on mid and lightweight enemies. Now, the use of a schism here is very smart, since it is the only lightweight enemy so far that can both actually survive a single hit from the Knuckle Blaster and also won't try to dodge the punch. Hi, late video edit here. Apparently that's not true. I don't know why I never checked, but I guess street cleaners don't try to dodge the Knuckle Blaster punch. I just assumed they did, I'm sorry. This moment is meant to demonstrate the value of using knockback to reposition enemies or more easily set up environmental insta-kills, which are two things that the Knuckle Blaster is very good at. And the rest of the level after you exit the first tower would be genuinely perfect for testing this out. But this is not something that is really effectively conveyed to the player at all in this moment. First of all, the wall behind this schism blocks its trajectory, so you don't actually get to see just how silly the knockback is, so you don't get to experience that feeling of whimsy that would hook you into wanting to try the arm out more after this point. Secondly, a schism really can't do a good job at conveying the strategic value of getting such hilariously humiliating stylish environmental insta-kills. While it is one of two lightweight enemies at this point in the game that won't collapse from a stubbed toe, it really can't survive much more than that. At this point in the game, especially coming off of the heels of the V2 fight, players are most likely going to be very comfortable with absolutely decimating schisms. They're a support enemy, they aren't a threat. Being able to kill one instantly like this isn't actually a valuable piece of information, or a particularly useful trait for a weapon to have. You already know how to kill schisms really fast at this point. You have a shotgun or coins or whatever. Now, Ultrakill does in fact actually have an enemy that would fit the role of an educational sacrifice for this moment perfectly, but that guy won't be introduced for another 10 or so levels, so unfortunately we're stuck with the schism. This is kinda just an enemy roster issue. It's why I've been bringing up the enemy roster so frequently in these videos, since the overabundance of support enemies means that, well, the developers couldn't actually properly convey the idea they wanted to get across here. Every other weapon introduction has had some way to show off its unique strengths. The shotgun was immediately valuable because of its ability to deal with hordes of enemies. The nail gun absolutely shreds through the mirage that the game jump scares you with the moment you pick it up. Each weapon introduction immediately presents you with one of the problems they are very good at solving, except the Knuckle Blaster, because lone schisms aren't actually a problem at all. You already have multiple weapons that you can use to easily dispatch of schisms. Speaking of, all of this is assuming that the player will even actually use the Knuckle Blaster to kill this schism, because you aren't actually put in a spot where the Knuckle Blaster would be the most convenient solution to this problem. It spawns it in like all the way over here when you move to jump between the platforms, accompanied by some extra support from strays. You have to slightly go out of your way to walk up to the schism and punch it, all while taking extra fire from the strays in order to actually use the Knuckle Blaster. Unless the player is really determined to try their new toy out, they're probably going to just fall back on other methods to deal with situations like these instead. Even more embarrassingly, this section is actually arguably better suited for the feedbacker, since you can handle it using projectile parrying or projectile boosting your shotgun pellets without even having to approach the enemies. Something which is, by the way, made ever so slightly more inconvenient for you due to the light platforming elements of this section. It would probably work a lot better if the Schism was put right in front of you on the first platform. Spoon-feeding you a free Knuckle Blaster kill like this would mean it's a lot easier for players to try it out, because it's just like, yeah, alright, sure, I guess I'll give it a shot. On top of that, the increased distance from the back wall gives you more of a chance to see the hilariously high knockback that the Knuckle Blaster has. That at least might help a little bit. I don't know, that's just my idea. Anyway, the other far less important issue that 2-1 has is how awkwardly it merges the idea of platforming with its combat. See, despite the higher emphasis on verticality and platforming, the level really doesn't merge this concept with the combat encounters very much at all. It kinda does a few times. Actually, the best combat encounter in the level pulls it off pretty well. The ambush fight with the falling platform uses the idea of verticality brilliantly by including multiple different heights that the enemies spawn on, as well as a deliciously effective use of a Cerberus, who acts both as a timer for you to kill as many of the other enemies as you can before the Cerberus manages to slowly walk its way down the stairs to your location, and also synergizes extremely effectively with the narrow platforms suspended above the open air, specifically because of the knockback you get when being hit with its shoulder bash dash. It's actually a sort of clever inversion of the knockback from the Knuckle Blaster too, turning the idea against you. It's great, it has verticality, it's got nice enemies, and therefore encourages you to move around more vertically while also keeping the theme of limiting your horizontal movement with how narrow the platforms are. But this is kinda the only fight here that really merges the platforming with the combat like this. Even in the tower sections, the fights almost entirely take place on mostly even ground, with one other notable outlier being the Maurice that spawns in at the end at the top of the second tower supported by 2 drones. Okay, the last issue with the level is kinda just the bounce pads. Now, okay, the use of bounce pads in the outside section of the level is fine. The issue I have is with how they're used in the second tower. See, aside from the abhorrent Knuckle Blaster tutorial, the first tower is actually pretty cool because of how it requires the player to solve the issue of vertical displacement on their own. It refines your basic platforming skills and makes you potentially learn a little bit more about your movement. The second tower then could have used the opportunity to expand upon the idea a little bit further and requires slightly more complex platforming from the player to finish the level. But its second tower can't actually really achieve this because it's full of bounce pads, which makes sense because this level introduces bounce pads and the Lust layer is like the only layer in the game that really uses the bounce pads beyond just having them as like a utility thing. But the thing is, bounce pads completely take away from the platforming in the second tower. Bounce pads fundamentally are a stage element that automates vertical movement, which means that the second tower doesn't really have any of the interesting platforming elements that the first tower does because, like, 90% of the upwards movement is automated by bounce pads. This doesn't really teach you anything. You just kind of, I mean, like, it's fun, but it doesn't teach you anything. And sometimes it does this just completely unnecessarily too. Like, come on, you don't need this jump pad here. It's not a big jump. Anyway, again, it's not like it's the biggest issue ever, but it's another thing that means that the gameplay concept of being focused more heavily on platforming doesn't really get fleshed out nearly as well as it could have been. Also, the tutorial for the dash jump happens immediately before you enter a location where dash jumping is almost entirely useless. Oh, oops. Anyway, that's enough for 2-1, let's get moving on to 2-2. 2-2 does a lot of things oh so right. I think just based on the concept alone, it had the potential to be one of the best levels in the game if it managed to properly marry the concept and the gameplay. The progression of our exploration into the City of Lust from 2-1 to 2-2 is extremely well thought out. While we did get to observe the city back in 2-1, it was from a very detached perspective. We were looking down upon it from a high-up construction site. While we were free to think about the implications of the city if we wanted to, we did not have to actually confront the reality of those implications. But as we progress further into Lust, we now actually find ourselves amongst the city streets. We get a much more personal view of this dying metropolis. The game allows you to start to unravel the mystery that was presented to you in 2-1. It's time to learn just what exactly is going on here. The music reflects this shift in perspective brilliantly. Instead of cold and desolate, the tone is now mournful, melancholic. The weight of a tragedy you have yet to fully learn about permeates every aspect of these empty streets. You can feel it just by being here. The sorrow, the regret, the guilt, the fear, the slowly dying remnants of hope. Now that you can see it all for yourself, one thought floods into your mind. This isn't hell. It might be in hell, but it's not hell. It can't be. And that is a fact made obvious to you in every last detail. Ones so undeniable that even the simplified rendering you have of your surroundings to save on processing power cannot hide them. The carefully built walkways, the warm, cozy glow of a fireplace, illuminating a dining room set for many. Perhaps a family, or maybe just a group of friends having dinner together, a far cry from the desolate isolation we saw in 1-4. These aren't horrible torture chambers designed for eternal punishment. This isn't just a house. It's a home. The best parts of this level are all of the details that don't actually serve any gameplay purpose at all. This basement, a bathroom, the remnants of two lovers embracing each other one last time before whatever happened to them happened. There's also, this guy, I don't know what this guy was doing, actually. He's a little bit weird, but hey, good for you, buddy. Communal green spaces decorate the streets. While the trees are still the fake ones we saw in Limbo, they feel like they are placed to comfort instead of mock. This isn't just a city, it's a community. At least it was. One of the homes you can explore contains a notebook, which shines some light on what happened here. The Judge of Hell, King Minos, built this city with care and love. He was subverting the design of God himself, believing eternal punishment for something as trivial as lust to be unfair. So he built a haven, a sanctuary amidst the chaos. I love the irony that the Judge of Hell was so non-judgmental, so forgiving, and that it was instead the supposedly infinitely forgiving God who would damn souls to eternal suffering in this horribly twisted realm of nightmares. This painting here you can find in the same house seems to depict King Minos, and based on the slight visual similarities between his crown and the crown on the head of the big monster stalking the city, it's possible for players to determine that this is in fact King Minos before the proper reveal in 2-4. And the context from a later terminal entry tells you that Minos is being made to watch his own corpse tear down the city of lust as a cruel punishment for daring to oppose the will of the creator. This beautiful haven is decaying. That is inevitable, and what's worse, you have to aid in its destruction. This level really fully cements the concept that you aren't some righteous hero or a badass super strong protagonist come to save the day. That's never what this was about. Remember, you are a machine, a tool of war, an angel of death, a starving animal. You don't have time to worry about the moral implications of these situations. You must keep killing so you can survive. That is your programming. That is how you eat. So, you cover the streets in blood and gore, destroy walls, and disable the electricity when convenient. Based on the extremely varied architecture and kinds of materials used to build these different structures, this city is very old. It has been providing sanctuary for centuries. Some houses are built of stone, some have wood, and other buildings are made of steel. The streets are illuminated by electrical lights, and there is a wiring system to transfer energy. But there are also many homes illuminated entirely through lanterns and candlelight. This city is truly unique. It transcended time, uniting people from different eras together, all being protected from God's punishment by King Minos. And you have to help destroy it. It's what you were made to do. You don't get the luxury of playing hero here. You are nothing more than a metal animal, perpetuating the cycle of life by consuming. You cannot escape from the natural order of all living things. Is that big fan room? Okay, so, despite the fact that this level has a lot of aspects that make it an absolute masterclass in environmental storytelling and theming and all of that jazz, for some strange reason, the middle section of this level completely ditches the concept of getting to wander around and explore a city, and in doing so, I think it kinda sabotages the tone and the pacing. This level would have been basically perfect, the gameplay being focused around exploring a more open city area to find junction boxes to cut off the power supply so you can progress is inherently a more non-linear experience compared to the rest of the game, which fits extremely well because it means your first playthrough of the level is going to be relatively slow-paced, practically forcing you to take in your surroundings and contemplate the circumstances you have found yourself caught up in. There aren't actually any proper arena fights in this level. It's entirely comprised of smaller incidental encounters. This structure is also why it was such a smart decision for the developers to move the tutorial for reusable checkpoints from 4-2 over to this level, since like it works really well to have this central area you can always come back to in order to get a checkpoint and reorient yourself. The slower pace here perfectly fits the tone that's being built up, and having a more exploration-focused, largely non-linear level is an extremely cool idea, especially as a one-off concept in an otherwise mainly linear game. On top of that, having to parkour around the city as you explore it and scale its buildings fits really well with the heavier emphasis on movement and platforming that 2-1 established. It's like a nice little progression. 2-1 gets you more used to platforming, the narrow arenas and vertical towers help you hone your skills and make you more precise with your movement, and then 2-2 would have been a sort of playground for you to go nuts in now that your movement skills have been refined. All of the aspects of this level's design should have come together flawlessly here. The setup was phenomenal, but well, as you can see with we got another big fan room here, and like, don't get me wrong, this big fan room does have a really neat little fight in it, but this whole middle section of the level that comes between the two city districts really doesn't fit in with anything else in the level at all. Like, in any capacity. This section, in my opinion, just does not work. And like, it really holds the rest of the level back in my opinion. It doesn't fit the tone of the rest of the level, it doesn't fit the pacing, it doesn't fit the conceptual idea or the visuals, it's just like, weirdly awkward. Like, okay, the core of 2-2 is how it's meant to force you into a more intimate perspective of the city and let you feel the weight of how sad it is that this wonderful city is coming to an end. It crucially resembles a city block more than it resembles a level for a first-person shooter, which gives the many incidental combat encounters a very unique feel to them. There's this really cool dissonance between what you're doing and how the world around you is clearly meant to be interacted with. It physically feels wrong to be using this space as a battleground because, well, it's not a battleground. The coloring of the lights is also really well done to help enhance this. The only time things ever deviate from the infinitely stylish bisexual lighting is when you are inside the buildings, where the warm glow of candlelight or a fireplace makes it feel comforting and nice and cozy. There is a very smartly crafted vision here, and then, you know, halfway through the level, all of this is kinda messed up by an area with a completely different visual style and a strictly linear progression. The warm colors here are, in fact, not at all comforting or inviting. This is a nightmare superstructure, the vibe is all off! If you didn't know better, I betcha I could sell this room as being a part of the prelude. But, you know, the music is still the same. It's still that melancholic melody that represents Minos' sorrow when the state of despair his city that he lovingly crafted is put in. The music perfectly reflects how the poor guy is being forced to watch as his own corpse destroys everything he has worked so hard to build. And like, yeah, that music really doesn't fit, you know, the aggressive mechanical contraptions of big fan room. Gameplay-wise, this change is also really awkward as well. As I said, this middle section is entirely linear, which doesn't fit at all with the more exploration focus of the start and end of the level. There's nowhere to explore here other than, I guess, the one small side area for a secret. Heck, the level's challenge really stops working in this section because it's tailored specifically towards the structure of the level being more open and non-linear. The level challenge is to clear the level in 60 seconds. It's meant to be like a cool speedrun thing where you optimize your route through the city sections and move as fast as possible, doing the bare minimum required to open the exit while dodging all of the enemies that end up spawning in. And this is an extremely satisfying concept as a level challenge for a more open, non-linear level, since this is the one kind kind of level where the process of determining an efficient route through things would require such a unique approach, where you have to plan a specific path through an environment that does not normally give you a general path to follow. But yeah, that dynamic really gets messed up a bit by this middle section. All you have to do in the middle section is get from point A to point B as fast as possible, the same as P-ranking any other level, removing all of the interesting parts of having to optimize a route in what is otherwise a completely open environment. This moment in general just really strikes me as being particularly weird. As we've seen so far, and as we will continue to see moving forward, Ultrakill's biggest strength is how it masterfully weaves the tone around and flips things on its head to create these incredibly striking, emotionally charged moments. This is like the one time where such a harsh contrast between tones and ideas falls completely flat. Especially because, like, I don't think it was actually meant to be one of those moments of tonal juxtaposition. It does feel like that they kind of just didn't know what to do with the level here, especially since there really isn't any fanfare or build-up between the two ideas. It kind of just swaps into it, and then it just swaps back into its original concept at the end of this weird out-of-place section with equally non-existent amounts of care. Conceptually speaking, this section is also just completely unnecessary because the concept of seeing the electricity generation of the City of Lust is what the next level is about. You ruined your own reveal here. Fuck, I hit my headphones. You ruined your- and this part, this is just more construction site stuff. Go back to 2-1, what are you doing here? Okay, so I have a couple ideas for why this part of the level might be so clumsily executed. Number one is that there is actually a loading zone in between both of the city district areas, so that both of them don't have to be rendered at once, but like, I kinda doubt that is the actual reasoning for why things were split up so strangely, cause, well, the game can handle much more complicated structures being rendered at the same time, as we will see later on. The real reason I think things are probably so poorly set up here is, well, the level wants to introduce the rail cannon to you. And in order to properly do that in an open, non-linear level, it would either have to give you the rail cannon immediately as you open the elevator doors, which would kinda take away from the initial reveal, cause, well, you would likely then be more excited about the prospect of a shiny new toy to play with, instead of the super sad, depressing atmosphere and dying city around you. Or the level has to find a way to funnel you into a specific path partway through so you can't possibly miss it, which is what the game ends up doing. But like, honestly, giving you a new gun, especially one as chaotically powerful as the rail cannon in the middle of what is supposed to be a more somber, reflective experience is kinda gonna clash with the tone anyway. See, I really feel like the rail cannon should have been introduced at the start of 2-3 instead of partway through 2-2, because the way it's implemented here really messes up a lot of the extremely brilliant ideas that they were trying to explore with this level. Like, imagine if the developers fully committed to the idea of this being one open area. Maybe you could have added in, like, a shopping district alongside the two housing areas. Maybe done a little bit more to expand this area and really build it up to be a space that people actually lived in. It would have been so cool to go secret hunting in a more interconnected sewage system too. Having all sorts of completely optional areas, much like what 0-2 did with its source machine path and its interconnected drainage system. And okay, so initially my plan for this video was for me to end up making my own version of 2-2 to go along with the video as a proof of concept, but I kinda ran out of time for that since it was taking way too long for something that would ultimately only amount to like 10 to 20 seconds of background footage. So here, this is the work in progress version where I just tried to tie the two city districts together in a more natural way. This is very likely also to be kind of the product of what happens when you create things for a large-scale project like this in sequential order. The lead developer Hakita expands on his thoughts on how he approaches making things a bit in the Ultra Revamped dev stream. As Hakita himself elaborates, it can very easily cause notable discrepancies in the quality between the early sections of the game and the later ones. Now, speaking from my own experience with making this series of videos as well as my Celeste Strawberry Jam video series, he is absolutely right that it is way more fun and way more satisfying to work on things in sequential order. It really does just give you a nice sense of progression to things. And doing so also allows you to share your creation with other people before it's actually technically complete. It's the whole reason we are even able to play this absolutely wonderful video game when we are. It just unfortunately means that early on, when the developers are still trying to figure out the game's identity, things are going to be a lot messier. And with that in mind, you can definitely see how that is manifested in the parts of the game I've talked about so far. The prelude on its own was made before the lead developer knew what he wanted Ultrakill to be. It kind of just, it really feels like a normal, generic, high-action, retro-style first-person shooter. But then in Limbo, you can see when he really realized what he could do with this project. The tone is suddenly infinitely more interesting and emotionally in-depth. The music becomes far more varied and experimental. And Lust is where it feels like the identity of Ultrakill really cements itself. The Lust layer isn't just a funky aesthetic and tone, it's got this deeper narrative to tell, and while it is a bit messy as we've seen so far, Lust ended up walking so everything that came after it could basically fly. And that's something I want you to keep in mind with the rest of this video. Despite the many criticisms I have with the Lust layer, I still do really like it. Okay. Without further ado, let's move on to 2-3. Okay, so 2-3 is, weirdly enough, probably the best level in the Lust layer, even though I would argue that it is easily the least interesting one. Like, okay, if the level design of 2-1 and 2-2 wasn't so messy, 2-3 would definitely be the worst part of the Lust layer, which I think is mainly because it isn't nearly as intriguing conceptually speaking compared to, well, the rest of the Lust layer. The idea is that you're going through one of the hydroelectric power plants that is supplying the city of Lust with electricity, which the game also uses to very lightly introduce water mechanics to the game. And, okay, we're not gonna talk about how well Ultrakill handles its water mechanics in this video. Even though it has water in this level, I don't really count that as being a water level. There's one pit with water on it, so we're gonna save that conversation for the video on the raft layer. I'm sorry. Anyway, the tone of this level once again shifts back towards being more generically action-focused. While the overall theming of 2-3 really isn't that interesting at all compared to the cold desolation of 2-1 and the mournful melancholy of 2-2, considering the layer as a whole, I think this regression in the complexity of the theming works decently well as a way to change up the pace a bit, as well as to raise the tension back up for the upcoming boss fight. Ultrakill's supposed to be a hyperactive, mega super amazing, awesome movement shooter after all. You gotta let the players occasionally feel cool, I suppose. So, the intensity and the energy is ramped back up. The first thing the game shows you is the massive creature that you've been slowly approaching, now looming directly above you. It towers over top of this electrical facility, and you are now directly in its gaze. It is now clear that you are 100% going to have to kill this thing. Gameplay-wise, I also really like the way the level expands upon the more movement-centered ideas of the two previous levels, by incorporating that into a couple of the arena fights. I actually don't have a lot to say about 2-3. It's a solid level, it's got decent theming, it shows you a unique side of the City of Lust while also being mostly more of a way to ratchet the excitement and tension back up to prime you for the boss level, but, like, it's kind of just uninterestingly good, you know? The only, like, real issue here is that the path to the blue pedestal is weirdly hidden for no real good reason. Yeah, but that's about it. Otherwise, it's a fine level. The fights are cool, nice, good music. Okay, but I don't really want to end this section of the video at that. That's actually a really boring way to do it. So, I'm gonna use this time to instead talk about a few things that I couldn't quite fit in elsewhere in a satisfying way. Hooray! I'm sorry, this section of the video is gonna be really messy. You're just gonna have to bear with me for this. So, back to the rail cannon. While the introduction for the rail cannon in 2-2 is pretty effective in a vacuum, it very clearly shows off its destructive potential by giving you some educational sacrifices to test it out on. The overall lower, more emotional energy of 2-2 and the smaller scale, ambush-style combat encounters don't really fit well with the introduction of such a weapon. Most of the combat encounters don't actually last long enough for the player to, like, use the rail cannon very much at all in these fights. Plus, being excited about getting your hands on such a deliciously deadly toy kinda clashes with the more depressing atmosphere of 2-2 in my opinion. So, imagine if you were instead given this thing right at the start of 2-3. You exit the elevator and boom, it's right there. Since it's being used as a sort of battery for a supplementary generator system, taking it can still cause the lights to go off and do its whole thing. And then it also works extra well because then after trying it out on the lineup of strays, you walk out the doors and bam! The first thing you see is the corpse of King Minos staring down at you. The game immediately presents you with the most tantalizing possible target to completely eviscerate with the new weapon you just got. It gives you a thing to shoot with, and then a thing to shoot at. Even though you can't shoot at it yet, it'll further build up excitement for the boss fight against the corpse of King Minos, because then you're like, yeah, I'm gonna use this thing against it. The generally larger scale fights of 2-3 also fit better with being able to use the rail cannon more often in general, because you're more likely to have the fights on your first playthrough last long enough to actually have the charge reset, which helps convey to the player that they can use this thing a lot more frequently than other super weapons in other games. Like, okay, I think it could have worked really well, you know? And it would mean the weapon itself would feel like it really fits in with the level thematically, since 2-3 is very industrial. It's literally a hydroelectric power plant. Electricity is like its whole thing, so yeah, of course you could introduce the electric rail cannon here. The fact that the rail cannon is also artificially a lot stronger in this level because of its interaction with water and conduction, it'll also help make this thing stand out more in the high action level with a lot of places to use the electric rail cannon. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. Okay, actually, alright, so I was initially going to talk about soldiers, mind flayers, bounce pads here, but like, can I be honest with you? I'm fucking tired of working on this video at this point. I'm recording this literally on the day that I'm uploading it. Trying to render the 2-X section made my computer scream in agony. I'm done. I'm done. Plus, I kind of am just, the stuff I was gonna say about those two enemies, it's just stuff I was probably gonna talk about anyway in the enemy video when I make that, so we're not losing really anything that I'm not gonna say later, so we're just gonna move on, okay? I'm sorry. 2-4 time. Alas, we are prepared for the final stop of our journey. Much like the rest of the flawed masterpiece that is the Lust Lair, my thoughts on the corpse of King Minos boss during the finale is equally paradoxical. This is probably the best build-up to a boss fight in the entire game, like, full on. The way they pulled it off was so good that they tried doing something similar again in the Violence Lair. The build-up to this fight is absolutely masterful. The way the corpse of King Minos has a physical presence and narrative purpose in every level of the lair is extremely cool, and it helps build up the tension and excitement for this fight throughout the entire experience. As I said at the beginning of the video, Lust's biggest strength is how each level leads into one another. Now, every non-climax lair in the game tries to have some sort of cohesion between the levels within them beyond just the visual style and general color palette. Sometimes you get things like the Greed lair, where your progression centers around your proximity to a large, recognizable landmark. In the case of Greed, it's a massive pyramid. You get closer to it, explore inside it, and then use it as a slide. Sometimes the progression between levels is more so focused on a thematic evolution, like how demonstrating the extreme nature of your violence by allowing you to see the contrast of the crimson blood on the white walls evolves into the spoils of your massacre getting completely drowned out by the red lighting, hiding your impact, showing how insignificant you are. Sometimes you get things like Limbo, where the progression is more of a temporal one, with the time of day progressing from early morning to midnight. And Lust is easily the best execution of this concept aside from the Violence Lair's conceptual evolutions. First of all, everything physically connects to each other like in the Green Lair, as each level sees you descending deeper and deeper into the city. You can even see 2-1 in the distance from both 2-2 and 2-3. But there's an additional layer to this progression, because every level also sees you drawing closer and closer to the corpse of King Minos, which has the effect of incrementally ratcheting the tension up, leading into the inevitable confrontation with him at the end of the lair, all while also having there be a narrative and tonal progression. As you move further into the city, your perspective becomes more and more personal, as more and more details about the history of the Lust Lair present themselves to you should you choose to seek them out. Your physical proximity to Minos representing you coming closer to uncovering the truth behind this derelict city. Minos' importance is made clear as he lies at the epicenter of the whole lair. I really like the contrast between Limbo's boss and Lust's boss. Limbo very fittingly left the existence of V2 to be a surprise until basically the last moment before you fight her, which works really well to give you that immediate oh shit moment as your brain has to very quickly process the fact that yes, you are indeed going to need to fight an opponent this strong right now. Well, Lust allowed you to dwell on the inevitability of this confrontation. It forces you to endure the intimidating presence of Minos' corpse throughout the entire lair. The corpse of King Minos is omnipresent within this circle of hell. He lies at the very center of the mystery, and unraveling it guarantees that you will have to confront this impossibly massive beast that was once the kind ruler of this forbidden city. This is his story. This is his lair. Each step you take draws you in. With every level, the lair simultaneously has you move closer to Minos, both physically and conceptually. Side note, but I really like how the Lust lair kind of like, it takes the idea of lust and sex being this sort of forbidden thing, like, oh, whoa, it's so spooky. Not spooky, that's not the right word, but you get the idea. And instead you've got this forbidden city that is not meant, it's not meant to exist. It's unholy. I just think that's a really cool, like, parallel to the normal concept of what lust is. Anyway. Back to talking about the level. The opening Tooth 2-4 shares the same ambient drone we heard back at the start of the lair when we first stepped out of the elevator shaft, and it carries with it a similar feeling of uncertainty. For the first time since that moment, Minos' presence is kept entirely hidden from you, but you know he's there, just beyond these walls of steel. He knows where you are, and it's just a question of when he will make his move. He will find a way to reach you. That is a guarantee. An inevitability that you are counting on. Because when he finally finds you, and you are put directly into the spotlight, you are ready. Because it doesn't matter what this Titan is, or who it was before this point. At the end of the day, it is still just another animal for you to hunt. Despite the fact that Minos gets the jump on you here, this whole time it was always you who was approaching him, finding a way down towards him, circling your prey like the apex predator you are so you can go in for the kill. Remember, despite everything that you as a player have learned about this dying metropolis, you aren't a hero for slaying the beast that is tormenting this city to save it. If you had the time, you would probably clear out the entire city yourself anyway, and frankly, you would do a much better job at it. None of the context you discovered on your descent through the Lust lair actually matters to you anymore. The remaining text is irrelevant. All in all, you just care about killing. That's what the game is about, after all. It is your programming. It's how you survive. It is the inevitable cycle of life. You are but another insignificant collection of atoms desperately trying to fight the ever-present march of entropy. You aren't allowed to have morals, and this entire lair represents that fact excellently. It's just unfortunate that, the actual boss fight kinda isn't great. Actually, aside from the brilliantly well-executed build-up and the thematic concept and the story relevance, this is kind of the worst boss in the game, in my opinion. Yes, I like this fight less than the Flesh Prison, actually. Believe it or not, I happen to really like the Flesh Prison. But, yeah, you're gonna have to wait for the Gluttony video to hear about that. Okay, first of all, 2-4 is dreadfully annoying to replay because of its lengthy build-up. Now, every boss level has a bit of an atmospheric build-up section to it, and on first-time playthroughs, the dramatic build-ups add a lot of impact to the boss fights. For this level specifically, you get to ride a tram down an empty subway tunnel. Now, in the context of a single playthrough, this works really well. After the intensity of 2-3, the tension and excitement is high, so it plays off of that tension very effectively here by pulling the brakes back on the pacing and having you slowly traverse this tunnel. The game might slow to a halt, but your excitement does not, and so it creates this feeling of anxiousness. The level is empty, eerily quiet. Everything is too still. You know that something is going to happen. You know that the corpse of King Minos will attack you, but you don't know when. It's structured almost like the build-up to a jump scare in a horror movie. Like, it's got all of these nice details too. It's got these ominous blast doors. Actually, the blast doors are very nice. I love them. Very ominous, despite the fact that it is just a door. It works well. And my goofy, autistic little self, of course, really likes the trains. I apologize for perpetuating the stereotype, but like, come on, look at it go. I'm sorry, sometimes I'm just really simple to please, okay? The issue here is that, well, there isn't a way to skip over the atmospheric buildup on replete playthroughs. Remember back in the prelude video where I talked about boss buildup sections and how cool it is that a lot of them have built-in shortcuts for you to take? Like, it's something that they even added to a different boss level in the Ultra Revamp update because, well, while atmospheric, moody sections are really cool on a first-time playthrough, they can quickly become absolutely excruciating if you decide to come back to the boss levels to play them again. In fact, levels being convenient to replay is an especially crucial property to have in Ultrakill specifically. More so, I think, than most other games in my opinion, because the game specifically encourages you to replay the levels a bunch in order to go for P ranks. Ultrakill literally locks its super boss levels behind P ranking the base campaign. Replaying the game a bunch is part of the intended post-game skill progression. And so, the replayability of each level matters a lot in Ultrakill. And yeah! 2-4 has no real way to skip the build-up section. I think the idea was supposed to be that you can, like, avoid using the tram entirely and just dash jump and slide jump through the level, which is, it's slightly faster, and I guess after the full Arsenal update, you can now also use the jumpstart nail gun on the tram to speed it up significantly, but no matter what, you still have to go down a long subway tunnel. You always have to go sidetrack to grab the blue skull, thankfully made a little bit easier once you get the whiplash, but still, and you always have to wait for the super cool ominous door to very slowly open. You always have to fight the annoying hand phase that doesn't even add to your kills when you beat it, so it is hypothetically skippable for a P rank. And then you always have to continue past the boss arena to grab the red skull and then go all the way back to put it on its pedestal before you can even actually fight the boss. Yes, I know there is a speedrun strat to clip out of bounds and skip all of this, and yes, I know the devs intentionally left a way to perform said out of bounds clip in the level with a small gap in the wall near the start, but like, come on, that really doesn't count. This isn't, like, actually a part of the level that players can feasibly engage and interact with in order to take a shortcut straight to the boss fight. This is a literal hole in the game that the developers put in, because they are in fact extremely cool and didn't want to ruin the speedrun route despite also wanting to patch the glitch that was initially used to get out of bounds. It's honestly quite strange to me that the developers never added a proper skip in this level during the Ultra Revamp, especially since they actually did add a shortcut into one of the only other boss levels that previously had the same issue of having an unskippable intro section. Anyway, before we talk about the design of the actual boss fight, we need to discuss the hand, which is also apparently, as the developer stated in the revamp dev commentary stream, the main reason they didn't add an actual shortcut to 2-4. Okay, but now before I continue, as cool and like nice and creepy and ooky spooky as the ambience is in 2-4, it really doesn't sound nice on repeat for like 20 minutes for the background of a video essay, so I'm just, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna swap it out for some Pizza Tower music, alright? Cool? We good? Nice. Okay, so the hand. I get the idea, I really do, and concept-wise, this is a great way to stick to the design theme of less gameplay being semi-focused on teaching you to become more adept at movement. You have to deal damage to the hand while also avoiding these massive shockwaves, forcing you to be able to move with a degree of precision in order to avoid taking damage while also being able to dish out damage yourself. On paper, that's a really good concept. It's kind of like making the player rub their belly while patting their head. It's just, man, the execution kind of sucks. I think the two biggest things that make this fight feel as awkward as it does are, one, how you are effectively fighting a wall, and two, how the hand doesn't actually have a visible health bar. Now, for the latter issue, I totally get why they would do this, because this moment is meant to be surprising and it's meant to make you panic, but they didn't really want to actually name drop the boss until you actually made it to the boss fight itself, so that makes sense. And, well, having a health bar show up that just says hand is objectively hilarious and would thus probably take away from the tension a bit, but it does mean that you have next to no way of meaningfully determining how much progress you've made on this fight, unless you're already really familiar with it. The only indicator you get is the way the hand winces before speeding its attacks up at certain health thresholds, but since the fight is so repetitive, and unless you immediately intuit that it has 3 phases and will wince twice before you kill it, you really have no way of knowing how close you are to beating this thing, and like, both being repetitive and not knowing how long the fight will be would probably both be fine if they were issues on their own, but combined like this, it really makes the fight feel like it's a lot longer than it actually is. Now, as for the part about how it feels like you're fighting a wall, I'm gonna save that for the proper fight itself, since the real boss fight has a similar issue. Okay, so since the battle here is against a colossal titan that makes you look like an ant, the developers now have a unique issue that they have to address when it comes to boss design, which is, of course, actually managing to sell this as a fight that makes sense and is engaging, instead of just being a gimmick for the sake of spectacle. Now, this is especially difficult in a first-person shooter game because, like, the concept just, it doesn't really pertain well to the core mechanic of basically clicking on thing. An infamous example of the concept really not working is the icon of sin from Doom Eternal, and a second, considerably less infamous example is the Kraken from GTFO. See, the issue with having enemies of this scale in these games is that there really isn't actually a way for the player to meaningfully engage with these foes. The bosses aren't even part of the arena, they're floating outside of it, and you have no way to actually reach them. It's awkward for both you and the boss, because neither of you can properly interact with the other using the defined rules of the game. Come on! Float into my crypt mines, you coward! The core of what makes combat in a game focused around fighting things interesting is the act of how you need to engage with your opponent, how you need to analyze it, understand its unique strengths and weaknesses, and then use that information to determine how to best approach the fight in order to eventually stand victorious. It's a situation where you and your opponent are supposed to be engaging with the same core set of rules so you can kill each other, and you thus need to understand how to use the game's rules to gain an advantage and overcome the challenge. And, well, without this dynamic, encounters like these two come across more so as cheap gimmicks as opposed to genuine battles. Which is probably why both the Icon of Sin and the Kraken also spawn in waves of normal enemies for you to fight on top of things, in an attempt to make up for how you and this massive beast really just can't actually fight each other properly. Okay, cool. Why the hell would any sane game developer ever want to put something like this in their game then? Well, that's probably because fighting something the size of a skyscraper is just objectively the coolest thing ever. And so it would be extremely awesome if you actually managed to implement a Colossus battle into your video game. The issue is, however, most games don't really have the necessary mechanics in order to properly facilitate such a tussle with a monumentally massive monstrosity. However, Ultrakill is actually in a bit of a unique position here because, well, it actually does have a way for you to engage with something of such a tremendous scale. It's the thing that this entire layer has been lightly revolving around gameplay-wise. Movement! Ultrakill affords you an extreme amount of mobility options. Heck, you spend most of the game running in circles around your enemies, and the most challenging and interesting fights in the game are ones that are centered around enemies that can match your pace or generally just really test your ability to stay light on your feet and be smart about your movement. And the bones of something like this are kinda there with the corpse of King Minos. All of his attacks are focused around keeping you moving in some way. His punches and slams take up very large portions of the arena, so you need to move around a lot to not get hit, especially because getting hit is extremely punishing. I do really like how healing through blood absorption is a particularly awkward task here since, well, Minos is all the way over there, and you're all the way down here. So while his attacks are generally very slow-paced compared to what you've been seeing previously, actually getting hit by one is a lot more punishing on average. To synergize with this, on standard and above, he summons a sort of black hole adjacent thingy to slowly home in on you, which will reduce you to 1 HP and max out your hard damage if you let it catch up. The black hole attack is actually particularly interesting to me here because, well, you generally aren't going to actually directly have it in view since you are mostly going to be staring up into the sky at this doofus. So you need to split your attention between Minos' punches and the black hole's movement towards you. Generally, you need to kind of mentally keep track of the approximate location of the black hole since you physically usually cannot be looking at both it and the boss at the same time. This is a kinda cool dynamic. The second phase even adds some complexity to it by adding projectile attacks from the parasites that burst from his eyes. That's, really gross, actually. Poor Minos really just can't catch a break, can he? That's all really cool, it's just, well, you're still basically just fighting a wall here. The physical size of the corpse of King Minos doesn't really have many meaningful implications on how you engage with the fight beyond the fact that you will always be staring up at the sky to see him. While the corpse of King Minos might work as a towering titan thematically, within the context of the actual gameplay, in my opinion, it really doesn't convey that physical presence in much of a meaningful manner, because you aren't allowed to actually interact with him much due to an invisible wall blocking your movement from ever truly reaching him. The hand phase has the same issue. While it might seem like getting too close to it is a bad idea, because it's, you know, it's a hand, it's slamming around, it's gonna slam you, you can never actually get close enough for it to potentially crush you. So you can kind of just press up against the invisible wall without thinking and spam nails or shotgun swaps or use the screwdriver and mostly manage to out-heal any damage you take from having less time to react to the shockwaves. You aren't fighting a hand reaching into the subway tunnels to grab you here, you're fighting a wall that occasionally sends shockwaves at you. And well, in the actual fight, you aren't fighting a titan, you're fighting a wall that punches you. Heck, even the black hole attack really doesn't feel like it's a thing Minos himself is doing to you. Aside from the animation to spawn it in, it's fundamentally very disconnected from the actual enemy. Even though the attack is well designed and synergizes with the fight, yeah, it doesn't really add to the feeling of actually fighting Minos himself, unfortunately. I think the best way to really visualize what I mean here is to look at the fight while you're no-clipping out of the normal arena space like I am in this footage here. Look at him. What are you punching, dude? I'm up here. This shift in perspective, I think, really highlights how awkward this encounter is. Look at how weirdly hunched up he is, sitting down, punching at nothing in this little tiny box. Much like you are basically fighting a wall, as we can see, Minos here is basically fighting a cardboard box. Compare this to Levi, who, aside from the tail swipe attacks, is clearly interacting with you, the player, and I am clearly interacting with Levi. Heck, I would argue that the entire Corpse of King Minos fight is basically carried by the fact that seeing the level challenge for the first time is genuinely one of the funniest moments in the entire game. Like, excuse me? You can do what? Holy shit, you can actually parry him. Who allowed the developers to make a game this cool? They have to be stopped! See, there we go. That's a sort of cool way to allow you to interact with the scale of King Minos. Even though being able to parry him is really more of a novelty than it is a unique interaction with the fact that the boss is so massive compared to you, it's really just cool because it intuitively feels like you shouldn't be able to parry something like this in the same way you can parry Swords Machine. So like, yeah, it gives you this moment of feeling really awesome and cool because, wow, look at you go, you're bullying him. Despite how amazingly cool being able to parry fists the size of houses is, I do really feel like we kind of missed out when it comes to the Corpse of King Minos boss fight. With how much emphasis was placed on vertical and horizontal movement in the Lust layer, it would have been perfect if we had more of an open area to fight this thing in. Imagine if we could scale a couple buildings and jump from rooftop to rooftop as this thing struggles to keep up with our speedy shenanigans, but also being punished if we don't manage to change our positions on the roof. Because that's the key way you can interact with a Colossus boss. The fundamental difference in the way you and the massive titan move and interact with your environment is what creates a dynamic that is unique to the distinct size between foes. That's why a lot of Colossus fights are usually based very heavily around platforming or climbing around on the boss somehow. While something of this scale could easily crush you, in order to do that, it has to actually manage to land a hit on you, and you are like an annoying mosquito it's desperately swatting at. Now, thankfully, the Corpse of King Minos is not Ultrakill's only attempt at making a Colossus-style boss fight. As we will see in the video on the Wrath layer and in the video on the Violence layer, the devs will later manage to explore this concept and creatively work around the limitations of a Colossus battle much more effectively later on, and actually in two very different ways. Ugh. It's honestly been a bit annoying to have to be so negative about parts of the Lust layer, because I do want to be fair and talk about its shortcomings, but I still hope I managed to convey the other side of the coin effectively as well. Remember what I said at the start of the video and have been trying to stay all the way through it. While this may be one of the worst layers in the game, I also simultaneously think it's among the best. Because gameplay issues aside, the narrative Lust builds up is genuinely really well done, and it's really interesting, and I still firmly believe it is probably the most cohesive cohesive layer in the game in terms of its story and thematics. Each level serves a very specific purpose to furthering the story of the reformation of the Lust layer and the tragic start of its downfall. The impact this layer has from a story and thematic purpose is so strong that people still frequently hallucinate the Requiem motif from 2-2 into other songs all over the rest of the game. And it absolutely beautifully sets up Minos as a character for if you decide to P-rank all of Act 1 and challenge the first Prime Sanctum. Because of how wonderfully the good parts of the Lust layer work, the emotional impact of the first secret superboss, Minos Prime, is elevated to a degree that the developers actually really didn't manage to properly capture with the second Prime Soul, Sisyphus, which is a concept I will expand upon a bit further in the Greed and Heresy videos. Sorry, again, though, I suppose if you've been watching this whole series thus far, you're probably used to me saying things like that by now. It's basically my catchphrase at that point, beyond telling you to drink water. Anyway, now that we've covered a 2-4, it's secret level time. I'm gonna be honest, I don't have much to say about the entrance to 2-S. You break the boxes, you drain the water. It's neat that the level challenge acts as a hint for the secret entrance, as usual, but that's not really anything special. Cool, I kind of rushed over this because we have a lot to unpack here. Before we start, I am going to give a mild content warning for this section. We will be touching a bit upon depression, nihilism, and generally existentially dreadful topics. Yeah, 2-S gets a wee bit intense. Cool, here we go. See, 2-S is a particularly interesting secret level. It stands out as being quite unique compared to the others since it's the only one to be entirely text-based. Every secret level usually keeps some aspect of the core gameplay mechanics of Ultrakill intact while messing with the context of how you engage with the level, thereby changing the genre. Before you comment it, yes, the Crash Bandicoot level still counts as maintaining some of the basic gameplay mechanics of Ultrakill. It specifically keeps the dash and sliding mechanics, and after the Ultra Revamp update, it re-adds the slam, so it still slightly resembles Ultrakill, okay? So 2-S, however, is entirely text-based. It's actually the only level in the game at the time of writing this that doesn't start with you landing at the bottom of an elevator shaft. And it's the only secret level that doesn't end with a special terminal that displays a testament from God. In fact, we are immediately met with the thoughts of what seems to be a completely new character. The screen darkens. Heavy steps. Ragged breathing. There isn't much time left. It might already be too late. I bit down harder on the last of my rations, held only by the skin of my teeth. The gates must be closing now, the last few barely making it. The rest of us never stood a chance. This feels weirdly important. Is this a human? Let's keep reading. Suddenly, from a blind spot, a figure struck me. There was no time to react before I came crashing down onto the cold, hard ground. I struggled to regain my senses, to at least see what fate would befall me in my final moments. But even in this abyss of endless terror, my mind could never have imagined the horror I witnessed. Okay, so if you don't already know what's coming next, I don't think there's really any way I can possibly prepare you for this. This game isn't real. I refuse to believe it. It can't be. There's no way. I swear, Ultrakill has to be a mass hallucination or something. What the fuck is this? Yeah, the Lust Layer's secret level is a visual novel romance dating sim. You know, I feel like I should have seen this coming in retrospect. You get to hang out with the prettiest girl in town. Also, she is really mean to you. Ultrakill, everybody. The first-person shooter action game. Okay, but can we talk about that first part for a second? I know it gets immediately undermined by the whole dating sim thing, but it always struck me as having a particularly clever, cheeky dual meaning to it. In retrospect, the reveal of a cliche anime dating sim was kinda obvious. This whole thing, in one hand, is literally just an overdramatic rendition of that trope where a character is late for school and is running with half-eaten toast in their mouth. But if you ignore the extra context we got of this being the setup for a cheesy romance story, it does feel intentionally written to depict a human in the process of desperately trying to escape something. Now, based on the descriptions of what we get of this person's surroundings, this definitely feels to me like it's meant to be from the perspective of somebody who ended up becoming trapped in hell. Just think about it. The labyrinthine pathways of arbitrary sharp turns seem stranger and stranger, Every corner felt a stranger, every straight line too long. Lines like these, to me, paint a picture of an impossible space where the reliable axioms of logic and geometry no longer dictate the structure of reality. And near the end of this segment, the narrator even describes their surroundings as an abyss of endless terror. Which, like, come on, this is definitely talking about hell. Well, we haven't gotten an overtly blatant example of it quite yet. If you've been paying attention, the physical structure of hell so far doesn't really make any sense at all. I know what you're thinking, by the way, and no, it is not non-Euclidean geometry. Weird looping hallways is not what non-Euclidean geometry is, and oh my god, is it frustrating that everybody calls it non-Euclidean geometry. Ugh. You guys are so lucky I don't have the time to actually give you a lecture on non-Euclidean geometry in this video, so you are spared from my wrath until I make the video on the fraud layer. Anyway, my best guess is that this is one of the victims trying to escape hell after humans ended up discovering that. Is my idea of this being a doomed human trying to escape hell necessarily canon? Most likely not, but also it really doesn't matter if this is a literal retelling of events. I think it's honestly more of just a fun little tease towards something greater, looming just beyond the veil of our current knowledge. Anyway, let's get back to our supposedly soon-to-be girlfriend, yeah? This is Mirage, and your dialogue options are, but as you talk to Mirage more and more, things quickly get a bit concerning. Oh. The game hits you with yet another twist. A new layer has been added to the joke. Haha, look, not only is it doing a dating sim, it's doing a Doki Doki Literature Club, and it's actually a spooky dating sim. I would normally roll my eyes at something like this, but this very quickly stops feeling like a joke. Mirage vents to you about her depressive thoughts, how her existential dread is paralyzing. As somebody who has been plagued by similar lines of reasoning to Mirage here, her dialogue feels horrifyingly familiar to me. Questioning the meaning of existence, pondering the eventual collapse of the universe into a stable state of energy where nothing ever happens again. Well, it makes it hard to feel like being alive is worth it in the first place. When I first played Ultrakill all the way back just as Act 2 properly came out, 2-S at first felt weirdly out of place to me. It was this strange, unrelated, self-contained little story about mental health. Keep in mind, I found 2-S before I really got to experience most of the content of the game, so at that point in time for me, Ultrakill was still just this silly little shooter game. And because 2-S is entirely text-based, it's not really that fun to replay, so it's understandably easy to completely overlook it and just kind of forget about it. But the thing is, 2-S is arguably the most important level in the entire game. How do I word this? This is gonna sound insane, but 2-S is Ultrakill. While the events that take place here are without a doubt completely non-canon and nonsensical, this quirky little love story is a reflection of everything that Ultrakill is about, and everything that the game stands for. The thematic concepts of both stories are cut from the same cloth. When I was writing the script, trying to explain this proved to be kind of hard, and it took a long time, and the video is already really long, and I kind of want to get it out. So, I'm actually gonna try a slightly different approach, okay? Instead of just telling you what I mean, I'm gonna instead try to show you. Let's see if I can reframe this interaction for you, yeah?
Yeah, well, you could do with a beatdown, so fuck off. But yeah, you're right. I don't really care about what you or anyone else thinks of me. So I'm not interested in trying to be nice just so you'll be in a good mood.
Why not? If we're stuck here together anyway, what's the point of making it worse for both of us?
What's the point of making it better? What's the point of even bothering to care? Hell, what's the point of anything at all? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Wandering around like headless chickens would only get us more lost. Since we're both heading to school and ended up meeting right here, that means there's a very high likelihood this spot is somewhere along the way. Therefore, we'll be better off just staying put and waiting for someone who does know the way. It's basic logic. You should look it up sometime.
Anyone who knows the way will already have gone there. Sounds to me like you're just looking for an excuse to give up.
Ha! can't give up if I never tried in the first place, and I don't make a habit out of trying.
Why not?
Because nothing matters. There's no point in trying if the end result will be the same anyway. Try as you might, you'll eventually just become forgotten dust in the wind like the rest of us. I mean, really, take a moment to think about it. The human mind, in its complete vastness, is capable of recognizing its utter helplessness and uselessness in the face of inevitable and unavoidable non-existence, but is incapable of coming to terms with it. We can only ignore it, hide from it, or temporarily escape from it, but the fact is that we are bound the way of all things. Death is unavoidable, not only to us, but all that exists or ever has existed. Every living being will eventually die out. Every speck of matter will eventually wither away and dissipate into entropy. It doesn't matter if you lived a good life or if you left a legacy behind. It doesn't matter if humanity survives for 1,000 years or dies out tomorrow. The end result's the same. The absolute nothing. Human intelligence is far beyond that of other animals, but it would be misguided to consider that a gift. All other beings have the gift of ignorance, of not understanding what we do. Our intelligence is not a gift, it's a flaw. It's an overextension of evolution. Intelligence, once a great feature in eons past, continued to grow unchecked and unfiltered, and has since passed a threshold whereupon it is no longer a benefit, but an active danger to its host. Much like the Irish elk, a species of deer that through uncountable generations of evolution grew antlers so wide and vast that it could no longer run away from predators, eventually leading to its extinction. The human mind is an evolutionary maladaptation caused by going too far in one direction that was once beneficial and will, sooner or later, lead to our extinction. On an individual level, it's already happening. Existential dread is already taking hold. I'm sure you felt it too. The pain and fear of being nothing, becoming nothing, the suffering of understanding that. We are unable to come to terms with it, so we hide from our own intelligence. We set limits. We stop ourselves from thinking deeply about what will happen when we die. We create distractions. We keep our minds busy with mundane activities and entertainment to stop ourselves from having to come face to face with the truth. We sublimate it. We transform our self-reflective suffering to another form, art, to keep it from consuming us, anything to avoid the panic. But these ways are all simply temporary. They're just there to push back the inevitable veil of helplessness and despair that will encompass and ruin us. In the end, nothing matters. There's no point in trying to find joy in life, for life in and of itself is suffering.
Do you see what I mean? This ultimately futile struggle of existence, the paradoxical nature of consciousness, life, death. This is what Ultrakill is about. And then, once this depressive spiral reaches its breaking point, 2-S throws yet another twist at you. It's simple, blatant, to the point, and once again, deeply important to the greater ideas that drive Ultrakill. You're wrong. You criticize those who consider our vast intelligence a gift, and yet also misguide yourself to believe our meaninglessness is a curse.
How could it not be?
Nothing we do matters in the end, and that is precisely why we are not shackled by the burden of expectations, the fear of eternal judgment, or the failure to meet up to an arbitrary definition of what makes our limited time not wasted. Time cannot be wasted, for there is no greater purpose to life than simply living it.
But still, in that case, the meaninglessness of our actions draws to the same conclusion. There's no reason to act, for any action is simply a temporary fluctuation that will, nevertheless, lead to the same conclusion.
Quite the contrary. Because we have no greater purpose, we are free to set our own, to create self-defined goals for which to strive. For some, it may be nothing. For some it may be pleasure, for some it may be creation, for some it may be improving the lives of others. It is because we have no greater purpose that time spent on goals set by oneself cannot be time wasted. In the end, nothing matters, and therefore you have no reason not to do what you want rather than whatever illusion of greater purpose is forced on you by others or even your own misguided thoughts.
I do understand what you mean. However, that doesn't ease my fear of the end. Even if I were to try to find purpose, I would still be paralyzed by the thought of becoming nothing.
And it is a thought worth fearing. However, abandoning purpose, hope, choice, goals, pleasure, and will cannot make that thought disappear. The fear, however, can subside. Giving up is not accepting the end, it is simply accepting the fear of it. It is embracing despair rather than facing it.
I see. Though as much as I'd like to embrace it, I am nevertheless struck with that paralyzing existential panic. I understand it logically, and I know there's no reason to live in apathy, but my emotional side refuses to listen. The fear persists. I cannot motivate myself to seek purpose, despite knowing I must.
This is true. The emotional is not controlled by the logical, however, they are interlinked. Just as the deepest, darkest depths of despair can overthrow reason and the logical, warping them to fit into that haze of depression, so too can reason influence and overpower emotion, regardless of how impenetrable its defenses may seem. By continually forcing to subvert those creeping negative thoughts with the positive logical ones, the emotional mind will eventually, slowly, gradually start to shape to fit the logical. It's not an easy job. It's not a quick job. It will sometimes feel like an impossible job. However, it can be done. With an immense amount of time, effort, and energy, it will improve. You can change. You can heal. And during the hardest times, when all seems lost and you want to give up, never forget. We will always love you. I really like this. From what I can tell, this level is based off of the lead developer's own struggles with depression and existential dread, and it's a refreshingly realistic depiction. It's not this over-idealized, cheesy motivational speech. It's realistic, grounded. It's just a simple reframing of the logic that got you into this existential dread in the first place. The meaningless abyss that is the universe doesn't have to be a prison for you to do nothing but wither away in as the laws of thermodynamics consume you. It's a blank canvas, the ultimate freedom. Who even cares if you have free will anyway? You can't tell either way, so you might as well stop worrying about it. It doesn't matter if you and everything you'd worked for will be erased in the grand scheme of things. The only thing that matters is whatever you decide matters to you. Live because it is correct. The more hopeful ideas and outlook of this last part of 2-S is a bit more subtly seen within the game compared to the depressive things, but it's there. Amongst the chaos, there is beauty to be found and enjoyed. And just the ability to experience it, even for the most fleeting moment with your own unique frame of reference, is worth it. 2-S is the soul of Ultrakill. It's what all of these cool emotional moments of tonal juxtaposition I've been repeatedly gushing about so far have been for. It's why I have a whole video planned all about the tone and themes and narrative of Ultrakill. Because, well, yeah, I could keep going about this for like another hour or two, and I will do that eventually, just not here. So let's finally wrap things up, shall we?
Well, I'll be damned. Guess you got a good head on your shoulders after all. Hell, I'm impressed. Man, I feel like I've just shed the weight of the world off my back. Or rather, you've done that for me. And honestly, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. You've given me a lot to think about. While I'm sure I have a long and hard road ahead of me, I'm optimistic. For the first time in what feels like eternity, I'm optimistic. Say, We're already way too late for school. It's become quite clear by now that nobody's going to come lead us there. So how about you and I ditch that passion-draining penitentiary and go grab something to eat, eh?
Penitentiary?
Penitentiary.
P-E-N-I-T-N-T-I-A-R.
Fuck, I don't give a shit. That it's English. It doesn't...
Yeah, sure. I got nothing better to do today. You're paying, though.
Oh, you sneaky bastard. But, alright, I do owe you one anyway, so what better time to cash out your did a nice thing to a girl way out of my league coupon than now, eh?
And just like that, we've come mostly full circle. It's gone back to being a romance story, but this time it feels a lot less cheesy. This is the genuine emotional connection and understanding behind love, which is such a funny way to round off the lust layer. Before I end things off and do my outro thing, I really was gonna try and work this into the script, but I couldn't figure out a nice way to do it. Go read the Dreams End Come True fanfiction project. I linked it in the description. It's fantastic. It absolutely nails the tone of Ultrakill, and it's also a really cool reflection of the deeper ideas of the game. It's really good. It fits a lot with it feels very I don't fucking know. That's the end. Here we go. That's the end of the video. Okay. That's it for now. Once again, thank you for watching my goofy little video. Once again, I'm really sorry that the wait between this video and the Limbo video was so long. As I've said multiple times, I'm kind of alternating between working on this series of videos as well as the Celeste Strawberry Jam video series. And that's probably kind of annoying, but this is the best way to make sure I don't get burnt out on either project. By the way, if you haven't watched the Strawberry Jam video yet, I highly recommend you do. It's actually really good. I still think it's my best video so far. Okay, so before I end off, a couple updates. I started a Ko-Fi just to potentially help fund these projects. I was thinking of doing a Patreon, but honestly, I don't know what I would do to make it worthwhile for people to spend money monthly, so I think a Ko-Fi is a much better option for now. So, yeah, I put the link for that in the description of the video. The other thing is that I am thinking of maybe making a Discord server for this channel, so I can, interact with y'all easier and make it, a bit more convenient to give updates about streams and video progress as well as video ideas and such, so it's not just radio silence for a couple months between videos, but I don't know. I don't know if that'll work out, but tell me what you think about that in the comments. Anyway, that's it for me. Remember to drink water. Bye-bye!